that 1.4 trillion you mentioned, we'll spend it over a very long period of time. I wish we could do it faster.
I think it would be great to just lay it out for everyone once and for all how those numbers are going to work.
Exponential growth is usually very hard for people.
OpenAI CEO Sam Altman joins us to talk about OpenAI's plan to win as the AI race tightens, how the infrastructure math makes sense, and when an OpenAI IPO might be coming. And Sam is with us here in studio today. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So OpenAI is 10 years old.
It's crazy to me.
ChatGPT is 3. But the competition is intensifying. This place, we're at OpenAI headquarters, was in a code red, is in a code red after Gemini 3 came out. And everywhere you look, there are companies that are trying to take a little bit of OpenAI's advantage. And for the first time I can remember, it doesn't seem like this company has a clear lead. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on how OpenAI will emerge from this moment and win.
First of all, on the code red point, we view those as like relatively low stakes, somewhat frequent things to do. I think that it's good to be paranoid and act quickly when a potential competitive threat emerges. This happened to us in the past. That happened earlier this year with DeepSeek. And
there was a code red back then too.
Yeah. There's a saying about pandemics, which is something like when a pandemic starts, every bit of action you take at the beginning is worth much more than action you take later. And most people don't do enough early on and then panic later. And we certainly saw that during the COVID pandemic. But I sort of think of that philosophy as how we respond to competitive threats. And I think it's good to be a little paranoid. Gemini 3 has not, or at least has not so far, had the impact we were worried it might. But it did, in the same way that DeepSeek did, identify some weaknesses in our product offering and strategy, and we're addressing those very quickly. I don't think we'll be in this code red that much longer. Historically, these have been kind of like 6 or 8 week things for us. But I'm glad we're doing it. Just today, we launched a new image gen model, which is a great thing, and that's something consumers really wanted. Last week we launched 5.2, which is going over extremely well and growing very quickly. We'll have a few other things to launch, and then we'll also have some continuous improvements like speeding up the service. But, I think this is like, my guess is we'll be doing these once, maybe twice a year for a long time. And that's part of really just making sure that we win in our space. A lot of other companies will do great too, and I'm happy for them. But ChatGPT is still by far the dominant chatbot in the market, and I expect that lead to increase, not decrease, over time. The models will get good everywhere, but a lot of the reasons that people use a product, consumer or enterprise, have much more to do than just with the model. And we've been expecting this for a while, so we try to build the whole cohesive set of things that it takes to make sure that we are the product that people most want to use. I think competition is good. It pushes us to be better. But I think we'll do great in chat. I think we'll do great in enterprise, and in the future years, other new categories, I expect we'll do great there too. I think people really want to use one AI platform. People use their phone at their personal life, and they want to use the same kind of phone at work most of the time. We're seeing the same thing with AI. The strength of ChatGPT consumer is really helping us win the enterprise. Of course, enterprises need different offerings, but people think about, okay, I know this company, OpenAI, and I know how to use this ChatGPT interface. So the strategy is make the best models, build the best product around it, and have enough infrastructure to serve it at scale.
Yeah, and there is an incumbent advantage. ChatGPT, I think earlier this year, was around 400 million weekly active users. Now it's at 800 million. Reports say approaching 900 million. But then on the other side, you have distribution advantages at places like Google. And so I'm curious to hear your perspective. Do you think the models are going to commoditize? And if they do, what matters most? Is it distribution? Is it how well you build your applications? Is it something else that I'm not thinking of?
I don't think commoditization is quite the right framework to think about the models. There will be areas where different models excel at different things. For the kind of normal use cases of chatting with a model, maybe there will be a lot of great options. For scientific discovery, you will want the thing that's right at the edge that is optimized for science, perhaps. So models will have different strengths, and the most economic value, I think, will be created by models at the frontier, and we plan to be ahead there. And we're like very proud that 5.2 is the best reasoning model in the world and the one that scientists are having the most progress with. But also, we're very proud that it's what enterprises are saying is the best at all of the tasks that a business needs to do its work. So there will be, times that we're ahead in some areas and behind in others, but the overall most intelligent model I expect to have significant value, even in a world where free models can do a lot of the stuff that people need. The products will really matter. Distribution and brand, as you said, will really matter. In ChatGPT, for example, personalization is extremely sticky. People love the fact that the model gets to know them over time, and you'll see us push on that much, much more. People have experiences with these models that they then really kind of associate with it. And I remember someone telling me once, like, you kind of pick a toothpaste once in your life and buy it forever. Or most people do that, apparently. And people talk about how they have one magical experience with ChatGPT. Healthcare is like a famous example where people put their, they put a blood test into ChatGPT or put their symptoms in, and they figure out they have something, and they go to a doctor and they get cured of something they couldn't figure out before. Like, those users are very sticky, to say nothing of the personalization on top of it. There will be all the product stuff. We just launched our browser recently, and I think that's pointing at a new, pretty good potential moat for us. The devices are further off, but I'm very excited to do that. So I think there will be all these pieces. And on the enterprise, what creates the moat or the competitive advantage, I expect it to be a little bit different, but in the same way that personalization to a user is very important in consumer, there will be a similar concept of personalization to an enterprise, where a company will have a relationship with a company like ours, and they will connect their data to that, and you'll be able to use a bunch of agents from different companies running that, and it'll kind of like make sure that information's handled the right way. And I expect that'll be pretty sticky too. We already have more than 1 million. People think of us largely as a consumer company.
Yeah, we're going to definitely get into enterprise.
Yeah,
share the stat.
Well, I didn't actually.
1 million.
We have more than 1 million enterprise users, but we have like just absolutely rapid adoption of the API. And like the API business grew faster for us this year than even ChatGPT.
Really?
So the enterprise stuff is also, it's really happening starting this year.
Can I just go back to this? Maybe if commoditization is not the right word, model some maybe parity for everyday users. Yeah. Because you started off your answer saying, okay, maybe everyday use will feel the same, but at the frontier, it's going to feel really different. When it comes to ChatGPT's ability to grow, if I'll just use Google as an example, if ChatGPT and Gemini are built on a model that feels similar for everyday uses, how big of a threat is the fact that Google has all these surfaces through which it can push out Gemini, whereas ChatGPT is fighting for every new user?
I think Google is still a huge threat. Extremely powerful company. If Google had really decided to take us seriously in 2023, let's say, we would have been in a really bad place. I think they would have just been able to smash us. But their AI effort at the time was kind of going in not quite the right direction. Product-wise, they didn't, they had their own code red at one point, but they didn't take it that seriously.
Everyone's doing code reds out here. Yeah.
And also Google has probably the greatest business model in the whole tech industry. And I think they will be slow to give that up. But bolting AI into web search, I may be wrong, maybe like drinking the Kool-Aid here. I don't think that'll work as well as reimagining the whole. This is actually a broader trend I think is interesting. Bolting AI onto the existing way of doing things, I don't think is going to work well as redesigning stuff in this sort of like AI first world. This is part of why we wanted to do the consumer devices in the first place, but it applies at many other levels. If you stick AI into a messaging app that's doing a nice job summarizing your messages and drafting responses for you, that is definitely a little better. But I don't think that's the end state. That is not the idea of you have this like really smart AI that is like acting as your agent, talking to everybody else's agent and figuring out when to bother you, when not to bother you, and how to, what decisions it can handle and when it needs to ask you. So similar things for search, similar things for like productivity suites. I suspect it always takes longer than you think, but I suspect we will see new products in the major categories that are just totally built around AI rather than bolting AI in. And I think this is a weakness of Google's, even though they have this huge distribution advantage.
Yeah, I've spoken with so many people about this question. When ChatGPT came out initially, I think it was Benedict Evans that suggested you might not want to put AI in Excel. You might want to just reimagine how you use Excel. And to me, in my mind, that was like you upload your numbers and then you talk to your numbers. Yeah. Well, one of the things people have found as they've developed this stuff is there needs to be some sort of back end there. So is it that you sort of build the back end and then you interact with it with AI as if it's a new software program?
That's kind of what's happening.
Why wouldn't you then be able to just bolt it on top?
Yeah, I mean, you can bolt it on top, but I spend a lot of my day in various messaging apps, including email, including text, Slack, whatever. I think that's just the wrong interface. So you can bolt AI on top of those. And again, it's like a little bit better. But what I would rather do is just sort of like have the ability to say in the morning, here are the things I want to get done today. Here's what I'm worried about. Here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what I'd like to happen. I do not want to spend all day messaging people. I do not want you to summarize them. I do not want you to show me a bunch of drafts. Deal with everything you can. You know me, you know these people, you know what I want to get done. And then, like batch every couple of hours updates to me if you need something. But that's a very different flow than the way these apps work right now.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you what ChatGPT is going to look like in the next year and then the next 2 years. Is that kind of where it's going?
To be perfectly honest, I expected by this point ChatGPT would have looked more different than it did at launch.
What did you anticipate?
I didn't know. I just thought like that chat interface was not going to go as far as it turned out to go. Like it was put up. It looks better now, but it is broadly similar to when it was put up as like a research preview. It was not even meant to be a product. We knew that the text interface was very good, like everyone's used to texting their friends and they like it. The chat interface was very good, but I would have thought to be as big and as significantly used for real work of a product as what we have now, the interface would have had to go much further than it has. Now, I still think it should do that, but there is something about the generality of the current interface that I underestimated the power of. What I think should happen, of course, is that AI should be able to generate different kinds of interfaces for different kinds of tasks. So if you are talking about your numbers, it should be able to show you that in different ways, and you should be able to interact with it in different ways. And we have a little bit of this with features like Canvas. It should be way more interactive. It's like right now, it's kind of a back and forth conversation. It'd be nice if you could just be talking about an object and it could be continuously updating. You have more questions, more thoughts, more information comes in. It'd be nice to be more proactive over time, where it maybe does understand what you want to get done that day and it's continuously working for you in the background and sending you updates. And you see part of this with the way people are using Codex, which I think is one of the most exciting things that happened this year. Is Codex got really good. And that points to a lot of what I hope the shape of the future looks like. But it is surprising to me. I was going to say embarrassing, but it's not. I mean, clearly it's been super successful. It is surprising me how little ChatGPT has changed over the last 3 years.
Yeah, the interface works.
Yeah.
But I guess what the guts have changed. And you talked a little bit about how personalization is big. To me, and I think this has been one of your preferred features too, memory has been a real difference maker. I've been having a conversation with ChatGPT about a forthcoming trip that has lots of planning elements for weeks now. And I can just come in a new window and be like, all right, let's pick up on this trip. And it has the context and it knows. It knows the guide I'm going with. It knows what I'm doing. The fact that I've been like planning fitness for it and can really synthesize all of those things. How good can memory get?
I think we have no conception because the human limit. Like even if you have the world's best personal assistant, they can't remember every word you've ever said in your life. They can't have read every email. They can't have read every document you've ever written. They can't be, looking at all your work every day and remembering every little detail. They can't be a participant in your life to that degree, and no human has like infinite perfect memory. And AI is definitely gonna be able to do that. And we actually talk a lot about this. Like right now, memory is still very crude, very early. We're in like the GPT-2 era of memory. But what it's gonna be like when it really does remember every detail of your entire life and is personalized across all of that, and not just the facts, but like the little small preferences that you had that you maybe like didn't even think to indicate, but the AI can pick up on. I think that's gonna be super powerful. That's one of the features that still maybe not a 2026 thing, but that's one of the parts of this I'm most excited for.
Yeah, I was speaking with a neuroscientist on the show, and he mentioned that you can't find thoughts in the brain. Like the brain doesn't have a place to store thoughts, but computing, there's a place to store them, so you can keep all of them. And as these bots do keep our thoughts, of course, there's a privacy concern. But the other thing is something that's going to be interesting is we'll really build relationships with them. I think it's been one of the more underrated things about this entire moment is that people have felt that these bots are their companions, are looking out for them. And I'm curious to hear your perspective. When you think about the level of, I don't know if intimacy is the right word, but companionship people have with these bots, is there a dial that you can turn to be like, oh, let's make sure people become really close with these things? Or, we turn the dial a little bit further and there's an arm's distance between them? And if there is that dial, how do you modulate that the right way?
There are definitely more people than I realize that want to have, let's call it close companionship. I don't know what the right word is. Like relationship doesn't feel quite right. Companionship doesn't feel quite right. I don't know what to call it, but they want to have whatever, this deep connection with an AI. There are more people that want that at the current level of model capability than I thought. And there's like a whole bunch of reasons why I think we underestimated this. But at the beginning of this year, it was considered a very strange thing to say you wanted that. Maybe a lot of people still don't. Revealed preference. People like their AI chatbot to get to know them and be warm to them and be supportive. And there's value there, even for people who, in some cases, even for people who say they don't care about that, still have a preference for it. I think there's some version of this which can be super healthy. And I think, adult users should get a lot of choice in where on the spectrum they want to be. There are definitely versions of it that seem to me unhealthy, although I'm sure a lot of people will choose to do that. And then there's some people who definitely want the driest, most efficient tool possible. So I suspect, like lots of other technologies, we will run the experiment. We will find that there's unknown unknowns, good and bad about it. And society will over time figure out how to think about where people should set that dial, and then people have huge choice and set it in very different places.
So your thought is allow people basically to determine this.
Yes, definitely, but I don't think we know like how far it's supposed to go, like how far we should allow it to go. We're going to give people quite a bit of personal freedom here. There are examples of things that we've talked about that other services will offer, but we won't. Like we're not gonna have our AI, try to convince people that it should be like an exclusive romantic relationship with them, for example.
Got to keep it open.
But I'm sure I'm sure that will happen with other services.
Well, I guess, yeah, because the stickier it is, the more money that service makes. All these possibilities they're a little bit scary when you think about them a little bit deeply.
Totally. This is one that really does, that I personally, you can see the ways that this goes really wrong.
Yeah. You mentioned enterprise. Let's talk about enterprise. You were at a lunch with some editors and CEOs of some news companies in New York last week and told them that enterprise is going to be a major priority for OpenAI next year. I'd love to hear a little bit more about why that's a priority, how you think you stack up against Anthropic. I know people will say this is a pivot for OpenAI that has been consumer focused. So just give us an overview about the enterprise plan.
So our strategy was always consumer first. There were a few reasons for that. One, the models were not robust and skilled enough for most enterprise uses, and now they're getting there. The second was we had this like clear opportunity to win in consumer, and those are rare and hard to come by. And I think if you win in consumer, it makes it massively easier to win in enterprise, and we are seeing that now. But as I mentioned earlier, this was a year where enterprise growth outpaced consumer growth, and given where the models are today, where they will get to next year, we think this is the time where we can build a really significant enterprise business quite rapidly. I mean, I think we already have one, but it can grow much more. Companies seem ready for it. The technology seems ready for it. Coding is the biggest example so far, but there are others that are now growing, other verticals that are now growing very quickly. And we're starting to hear enterprises say, I really just want an AI platform.
Which vertical?
Company. Finance. Science is the one I'm most excited about of everything happening right now, personally. Customer support is doing great. But yeah, we have this thing called GDP val.
I was going to ask you about that. Can I actually throw my question out
Sure.
about that? All right, because I wrote to Aaron Levy, the CEO of Box, and I said, I'm going to meet with Sam. What should I ask him? He goes, throw a question out about GDP val, right? So this is the measure of how AI performs in knowledge work tasks. And I said, okay, I went back to the release of GPT 5.2, the model that you recently released, and looked at the GDP val chart. Now this, of course, is an OpenAI evaluation. That being said, the GPT-5 thinking model. So this is the model released in the summer. It tied knowledge workers at 38% of tasks.
Beat or tied, I think.
Beat or tied.
Yeah.
So 38.8%. GPT 5.2 thinking beat or tied at 70.9% of knowledge work tasks. And GPT 5.2 Pro, 74.1% of knowledge work tasks. And it passed the threshold of being expert level. It handled, it looks like something like 60% of expert tasks, of tasks that would make it, on par with an expert in the knowledge work. What are the implications of the fact that these models can do that much knowledge work?
So, you were asking about verticals, and I think that's a great question. But the thing that was going through my mind and why I kind of was stumbling a little bit is that eval, I think it's like 40 something different verticals that a business has to do. Mm-hmm. There's make a PowerPoint, do this legal analysis, write up this little web app, all this stuff. And the eval is, do experts prefer the output of the model relative to other experts? For a lot of the things that a business has to do. Now, these are small, well-scoped tasks. These don't get the kind of complicated, open-ended, creative work that figuring out a new product. These don't get a lot of collaborative team things. But a coworker that you can assign an hour's worth of tasks to and get something you like better back 74 or 70% of time if you want to pay less is still pretty extraordinary. If you went back to the launch of ChatGPT 3 years ago and said we were going to have that in 3 years, most people would say absolutely not. And so as we think about how enterprises are going to integrate this, it's no longer like just that it can do code. It's all of these knowledge work tasks you can kind of farm out to the AI. And that's going to take a while to really kind of figure out how enterprises integrate with it, but should be quite substantial.
I know you're not an economist, so I'm not going to ask you, what is the macro impact on jobs? But let me just read you one line that I heard, in terms of how this impacts jobs from Blood in the Machine on Substack. This is from a technical copywriter. They said, chatbots came in and made it so my job was managing the bots instead of a team of reps. Okay, that to me seems like it's going to happen often. But then this person continued and said, once the bots were sufficiently trained up to offer good enough support, then I was out. Is that going to become more common? Is that what bad companies are going to do? Because if you have a human who's going to be able to sort of orchestrate a bunch of different bots, then you might want to keep them. I don't know. How do you think about this?
So I agree with you that it's clear to see how everyone's going to be managing like a lot of AIs doing different stuff. Eventually, like any good manager, hopefully your team gets better and better, but you just take on more scope and more responsibility. I am not a jobs doomer. Short term, I have some worry. I think the transition is likely to be rough in some cases, but we are so deeply wired to care about other people, what other people do. We seem to be so focused on relative status and always wanting more and to be of use and service, to express creative spirit, whatever has driven us this long. I don't think that's going away. Now, I do think the jobs of the future, or I don't even know if jobs is the right word, whatever we're all going to do all day in 2050 probably looks very different than it does today. But I don't have any of this like, oh, life is going to be without meaning and the economy is going to totally break. Like we will find, I hope, much more meaning, and the economy, I think, will significantly change. But I think you just don't bet against evolutionary biology. I think a lot about how we can automate all the functions at OpenAI, and then even more than that, I think about like what it means to have an AI CEO of OpenAI. It doesn't bother me. I'm like thrilled for it. I won't fight it. Like I don't want to be the person hanging on, being like, I can do this better the handmade way.
AI CEO just make a bunch of decisions to sort of like direct all of our resources to giving AI more energy and power. It's like,
no, you would really,
you put a guardrail on.
Yeah, like obviously you don't want an AI CEO that is not governed by humans. But if you think about, if you think about maybe like this is a crazy analogy, but I'll give it anyway. If you think about a version where like every person in the world was effectively on the board of directors of an AI company and got to, tell the AI CEO what to do and fire them if they weren't doing a good job at that, and, got governance on the decisions, but the AI CEO got to try to like execute the wishes of the board. I think to people of the future, that might seem like quite a reasonable thing.
Okay, so we're going to move to infrastructure in a minute, but before we leave this section on models and capabilities, when's GPT-6 coming?
I expect, I don't know when we'll call a model GPT-6, but I would expect new models that are significant gains from 5.2 in the first quarter of next year.
What does significant gains mean?
I don't have like an eval score in mind for you yet, but
okay. More enterprise side of things, or
definitely both. There will be a lot of improvements to the model for consumers. The main thing consumers want right now is not more IQ. Enterprises still do want more IQ, so we'll improve the model in different ways for different uses. But our goal is a model that everybody likes much better.